Good morning and welcome to the February 7th, 2024 Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. Some of us might like to go back a year. I'm calling the meeting to order, and with us we have Ms. Vega to explain our public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. During citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meeting Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. The City Council and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending investigations, claims, or litigation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And do we have our interpreter with us today?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, my name is Elsie Duarte. I will be servicing as Spanish interpreter for today's Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee session. I will now take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and review some guidelines. Buenos días. Bienvenidos a la sesión de la Subcomisión de Seguridad Pública y Justicia. Mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y estaré sirviéndoles hoy como intérprete a nuestra audiencia de habla hispana. Deseamos pedirles antemano, si es que va a dar un comentario público, por favor, hable despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, pausa después de cada 1 o 2 oraciones para poder interpretar lo que esté diciendo de la manera más completa posible. Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Elsie. Our first item of business is call to the public, and I believe we have one online.
Actually, we have someone signed up to speak in person.
And then we do have someone
Ms. Ann
signed
Anders.
to speak in purpose. Ann Anders. We'll hear from you now.
Good morning, Chairwoman O'Brien and subcommittee members. Thanks for this opportunity. I know I'm normally up here to speak. Oh, by the way, I'm Ann Ender. I'm president of the Operation Blue Ribbon, and I'm a pro-public safety advocate. I know I'm normally up here speaking in support of just exactly what you've all done regarding the DOJ, but I've become increasingly concerned not only about our Phoenix Police Department, but the numbers for the fire department. We see the response times continuing to grow. Their staffing obviously having some issues. And let me just pull my notes up because I'm starting to get nervous. And as long as I've been a resident, an active member of the community, I've been fortunate to, and I track that I've been able to have fairly decent response times, but I know that those are continuing to change. So I'm just here to express my concern and offer any assistance that I can offer in terms of rallying the community to find some solutions to this. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Okay. Our next item is the approval of the January 3rd, 2024 meeting minutes. Move to approve. I have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Item number 2 on our agenda is to hear from our fire department. We'll be hearing from Executive Assistant Chief Scott Walker and Assistant Chief Ray Ochoa regarding fire staffing, ambulance model, and response time update. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Scott Walker, Executive Assistant Fire Chief with the Phoenix Fire Department. Joining me today is Assistant Chief Ray Ochoa. Chief Ochoa oversees our North Operations Section, our EMS section, and our CAP program. So today we're providing the subcommittee with our quarterly update on our hiring, staffing, and activity levels. We've also included an overview of a proposal we've developed on a restructuring of our current ambulance program. We believe the new structure will better align with the needs of our community today. So starting with our sworn staffing, so as we've mentioned before, our hiring goal is to really reach 100% fully staffed at all times. We know this allows for the most opportunity and a reduction in the need for overtime. Now, the reality is there's always some vacancies due to attrition that occur, but what we're trying to do is maintain that 100%. And the way we do that is really through a very proactive approach, looking out always 2 years ahead, looking at the number of people retiring, looking at any new fire stations or new people that may be coming into the system, or any action of mayor and council to give us new full-time employees. Based on that forecast, we really work with our HR section to make sure that they are preparing a testing process to make sure we always have a list available to hire from. We also work with our training staff to make sure they are ready to train firefighters when we need them. For example, historically, we train about 2 academies a year. Last year and then this year, because of support from mayor and council, we've added more bodies, and we've had to have 3 academies, and our staff has kept up with that demand. So through this really proactive approach, we're able to really work towards that 100% staffing goal. So our training process is about a 12-month process. So when an individual is hired to be a Phoenix firefighter, they go to the training academy for about 14 weeks. This is where they're learning the basic skills of being a firefighter. Firefighting, EMS, hazmat, and many other skills. Then from there, they transitioned into 3 rotations through 3 different fire stations for about 3 months each. And at this time, as they're working with senior firefighters, senior crews to really get that on-the-job training, to really learn what it is to be a Phoenix firefighter. Then after that 12-month process, now they're fully trained. They're out filling vacancies within the system, working on fire apparatus every day. Our sworn recruitment efforts, now the chart hasn't changed since last time we briefed you, just simply because we haven't hired any, done a testing process since then. But our recruitment efforts are really multifaceted. So we have dedicated staff in our HR section. We have a labor management committee that's always looking for ideas how to recruit. We have our affinity groups, which, for instance, we have a Black firefighters group, Hispanic firefighters group, female firefighter group, and others. And these groups really are a workforce multiplier for us. They allow us to reach into communities across this city and make sure that everybody knows what the job of being a firefighter is, that it's a job for them if they're interested. And then these groups really help to mentor and prepare people for that process. And so having this multi-pronged approach allows us to ensure we're reaching everybody, but also ensure we have a robust pool to pick from. So our testing process currently is a written test and then a 2-interview panel process, and then from that we create a list that we then hire from as the need arises. Now we are looking at moving really into the more of a future type testing process. We want to look at testing potentially twice a year with fixed dates. By doing this, we're going to make sure we can capture people when they're available. We don't want someone to have to wait a year to test with us and potentially lose them to another fire department or another career. So by testing twice a year and then using a virtual online type tool, we can actually move people through faster. This is proven successful in other parts of the city with some other tools HR has, but also in the fire service. So we want to really looking to modernize that, and this is something we're working towards as a goal. And then the trend and forecast, as I said, the chart hasn't changed, but if you look at the chart, the, I'd say kind of goldish or brown column on the left is the number of people that applied for positions year over year. There are a few gaps here because those are years we may not have tested. And then the gray column on the right of each year is the number of people that actually showed up for the test. So we're fortunate that we are relatively stable and that we still have a large number of people to pick from and that want to be firefighters. But we're also mindful and want to watch this. We want to make sure we don't see that trend or a trend start where it's going down. We may not have the full robust pool. So through our efforts, we're going to work to maintain that high level of numbers and something we really in the fire service benefit from having that large pool.
Yes, Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you. Can we go back to so here in 2023, it says 1,271 and then 730 tested. In 2015, which seemed to be our best year, we had 1,621 that tested. And 2015 versus 2023, we have a lot more people that live in the city of Phoenix. What do you think about that difference? Like, is that a difference that we're comfortable with? Do we feel, I know you just said that we're on the right track, But given that in 2015, a lot less people lived in the city of Phoenix, why do we feel so confident with this number? If you can just walk me through that, because to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Madam Chair, Councilman Guardado, thank you for the question. So we certainly are aware of that and acutely aware, I would say. And so no different than other private and public sectors, right? There's competition workforces out there, changing demographics. Obviously, some people like remote work. We hear about that. That's something that we can't offer to our sworn folks. So you're right, the numbers are less than in 2015, but we're fortunate to have still a large number that are interested. But as I said, what we're doing is we are really, I would say, working to increase our efforts to make sure that number does not go down anymore. And again, using all of the tools I mentioned, our affinity groups, we are bringing in fact, Chief Durant has just reassigned some of our command staff in our HR section to really reinforce recruitment. We're actually using something we have seen on Phoenix PD is putting a wrap on some of the sides of fire trucks to really get that message out about being a Phoenix firefighter. So you're correct that the number is less than what it was in 2015, but we're aware and we are taking steps to make sure that number does not go down and hopefully go up. Now, when you look across the city, you know, the city, other departments are a little jealous because we still have a pretty large pool. Certainly our other partner in public safety, they would love to have those numbers. But, you know, we are aware and watching that closely to make sure it does not go down anymore.
So you're saying that the plan is to put up big banners to say we're hiring. Is there anything else that we should be doing or any way where we can be helpful to making sure that we can increase that pool?
Well, Madam Chair and Councilman Guardado, we're looking at all options. We're looking at what Phoenix PD does. They obviously have a very robust recruitment process. We're looking at what other fire departments do as well. And so I can appreciate your support that you always given to us, and we can certainly get messaging to you. And I know all the council members are very good about putting information in your newsletters, so that's something we can work with your office as well. And certainly we will make sure that any areas we identify opportunities, we'll get that to you and all the council members. But know that we are really exploring anything and everything. The fire chief, myself, we tend to go to conferences. We talk to other fire departments to really learn what's happening across the country and the fire service, but not just the fire service, really what's happening out there. So we're exploring all options, and we'll continue to really keep you informed and the council informed of what we're doing.
And then I guess another question I had for you, I know that before with our police department, we knew that wages was a big problem, right? That we were losing a lot of our folks to other cities that were a lot smaller because they paid better than we did. And I know that with the class income study, we fixed a lot of that. What are the challenges within the fire department? Do we feel that we're losing folks from the Phoenix Fire Department to other fire departments? Is there a way where you can pinpoint that?
Madam Chair and Councilman Guardado. So this is something that we are watching. We're fortunate we don't really lose a lot of people through just randomly leaving. You know, we have obviously a very good pension system, the city with the class and comp and the commitment from city manager's office to make sure we're being paid at the higher levels in the region, and that's been accomplished. So I don't really believe it's so much of a pay issue. Right now, again, we're just challenged with the workforce. It's a changing demographics. People in the world are different. Our work is, while it's very rewarding, it is somewhat, tactile and a little more blue collar, if you would. We do have to go out and get dirty, and not everybody maybe is interested. So we're really, I think, competing with that workforce out there. Now, as far as what we can do we see people leaving? Obviously, we are a busy fire department, and we do want to make sure we're taking care of our members, and through our efforts to support our members and bringing things forward as we do for more resources, which the mayor and council have been very supportive of the last few years for us. I think that's going to be key, is we got to be considerate and understanding of the impact to being high activity department that we are on our members, and make sure we're addressing that. But we are aware of that, and then we are taking steps to bond, certainly as new fire stations, new apparatus. You'll see in the other part of this proposal is a restructuring of our ambulance program, which we think will address some of those concerns. So we're watching, and we do exit interviews when someone does leave prematurely, less than 20 or 25 years. But that happens very infrequent within the Phoenix Fire Department. And oftentimes what we find is people, again, changing lifestyles. People have decided that we've had people move to Missouri to start a farm and those types of things. So it's just a changing world we're in, and changing priorities, work-life balance, those types of things, I think, what we're competing against.
Great, well, thank you so much. Make sure, get that stuff to our office, and we'll definitely put it in our newsletters, and we'll, make sure that we get the information out there so we can get more people to apply. Thank you so much for answering all the questions. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you. Chief, I think you used the word stable. That's not the word I'd use for this. Scary might be the word I might use. With the police department, there were, right or wrong, whether you agree with it or not, there was media coverage, there was specific incidences around about 2020 and beyond that definitely affected people's willingness or desire to become police officers. Plus, you had the whole, now I just want to work from home. Obviously, you can't work from home as a police officer. But this predates that. You've got basically half as many applicants as you had in 2015, and less than half as many who are actually testing. So it's good that you still have volume, but if this was a business and this was the sales chart, I'd be worried you'd be going out of business. If it was a stock, I'd never buy it. I mean, if this was the trend line for 8 years, I mean, it's a pretty long period of time. So I would just encourage you to do more investigation. I get that people have changed. People don't actually want to go to the office. People don't want to get dirty. I get that. But this kind of predated those discussions by quite a bit, and it's a pretty dramatic drop. Just something to consider. If it continues, you're going to have a hard time filling all the spots when the older people retire. Keeping in mind I use that word older, they're all younger than me, so that's depressing. But beyond that, I mean, it's going to happen sooner rather than later. So I guess doing what you can for their job satisfaction and making it more attractive, and maybe talking to the police about what they're trying to do to up the number of people applying. Because I would imagine you're somewhat fishing, at least age-wise, and frankly, willingness to get out and hustle and work. You're fishing at kind of the same pond, so without cannibalizing those efforts, you might want to see what they're doing if they found stuff that helps. Because you definitely need to do it before the situation gets any worse.
Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, we appreciate your input and comments, and we agree. We are watching this closely, I can assure you. We've talked about how we become the proverbial data-driven organization we are. And one of the other things is we've been really, in the fire service, had the luxury of had a high level of number of people apply. For instance, when I got hired, a long time ago, we had 5,000-6,000 people apply. And so we also are looking at, are we looking at the right metric? Just because you have 6,000 people apply, if there's only 200 that are truly qualified or truly want to be or will meet the needs of the fire department, is that the right metric? So what we're trying to do through those proactive efforts is reach out to the community, make sure we understand what's stopping them and address those issues, mentor those folks, prepare those folks, so really look at I would be happy if we had 500 people apply and every one of those 500 are really ready to be Phoenix firefighters and qualified and would all be a great option. While that would not look good on the chart, but if we had 500, we'd be able to fill every need we have. So we're looking at that as well as what's the right metric, but also making sure we're preparing people for the job through mentoring, through addressing whatever challenges or obstacles they might have for the job. You know, we, as far as EMT, right, is there ways to get people into high school programs? And we're looking at all those things through our recruitment efforts to address that. So I appreciate that. The fire service, this is, and we're not alone. Certainly, this is what you see in the fire service as far as trends. And those conversations are happening at a national level and certainly at a local level.
Yes, sir.
I guess I would just say, I understand what you're saying about you'd rather have quality, smaller pool applicants that's quality applicants. I would be a bad applicant. Can't stand heights. You wouldn't like me as an applicant, just wouldn't work. But I get that younger people particularly, you know, they watched half an episode of Chicago Fire in a bar last night. The sound was down, but they got the basic gist of it, so they apply, and maybe it's not the best fit. I get that that's probably 1,000 of your when you had 2,477 people. I get that, and then they realize this just isn't for me, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. And weeding that out, I'm sure, takes up a lot of your time. But it still is such a precipitous drop that it can't be ignored. It almost seems like people decide, I just don't want to do that anymore. And earlier than they decided that with police, because we didn't really have a problem with the police applicants and recruitment until literally 2020, like things just dropped off the table. It was a pretty rapid drop. This is almost more worrisome in some ways because it's definitely been a longer term thing. And it sounds like you're saying a while ago, when you applied, that there was, a double again the number of applicants. It also sounds like you're not saying people would rather work in Glendale. We're not really losing people in that fashion, from what you just said. Sounds like people are just deciding they just don't want to do it. And that's a heavier lift and a more intractable problem. With police, I could speculate, okay, the climate changes, it might come back around. This seems more insidious in some ways. So I don't think you're discounting it, but the use of the term stable, this is anything but stable, and I'm sure you're concerned, but maybe redouble the level of concern. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you, Councilman Waring.
Thank you, Councilman Waring. Please continue.
Let's see. This next chart is our sworn staffing levels, kind of referring back to our goal. This is all of 2023, so broken down by month. The gold column on the right above each month is the sworn count that we're authorized to fill. The red column on the left is the actual filled count. So if you look over the last 5 months of the year, I caution to say stable, but we were relatively close to that authorized count. Again, that attrition happens, and you can see we were down about 28 positions in December from our authorized fill count, but we put 43 people in the academy in January. So we did get some new positions in the budget in January, so it'll change a little bit, but that's how we're really trying to maintain that full staffing, and this captures, I think, demonstrates that, our efforts. Our efforts have really moved now in that proactive approach I mentioned, but we're actually also looking at attrition through the academy. So we're accounting for those, trying to hire for those. So when we graduate academy class, our goal is to be plus 3 or 4 or 5 people. We absorb those over the next 30 to 45 days after the academy. So again, really striving that 100% staffing level.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you. So I didn't want to jump ahead, but I anticipated these questions from the last chart, and I'd already looked at this one. This actually is much more positive, at least over the course of 1 year. We actually have more filled in recruits than we had entire positions a year ago at this time. And you've netted in filled in recruits an extra 26. I'm sorry, I was looking at apples and oranges. But here you've got an extra 26, so you've actually increased, while at the same time you've had, another big drop in applicants and tested. So I assume some of those have worked their way through the process and are now reflected in the December numbers, going back to 2023. So that seems kind of positive. You're still able to fill the spots more than you even had available. But I mean, what would account for in January you had 1,745 filled, but you were able to get up to 1,771 in December, but in neither case, you filled all the spots you had available. See what I'm saying? Like, it sounds like, it looks like you're nodding, so I assume you understand what I'm trying to get at. Like, why didn't you have 1,771, why didn't you fill the entire 1,760 in January? You were able to get to 1,771 by December, and actually 1,786 in September.
Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, yes, so the reason there's a gap is that attrition happens. Truly, we track every day, and attrition will happen. We also, as you see, gain positions in the budget. Mayor and Council have supported us significantly over the last 2 years. I can tell you, if you go back about 2020, our sworn authorized count was in the 1600s. So we've actually gained over 200 positions over the last few years, and you can see where we're at. So what happens is also, we are being more aggressive and proactive in that forecast, as I've mentioned, to make sure that we are accounting for all that attrition, even through the academy. Historically, we would really, when we accrued, I'll say around 30 vacancies, then we would have an academy for 30, but unfortunately, you graduate the academy, we may have lost 5, 6, 7 people, so you're down, and then you start accruing positions again before the next academy. But this new process we're doing is really working as intended. Fortunately, we keep adding positions that we can fill, but by the fall, we are on track to be plus positions, as I mentioned, when we graduate the academy. So it's really just because of attrition. We only have 3 academies, or 2 in the past, 3 now last year, 3 this year, and it really is just keep adding bodies, which is a good thing because of Mayor and Council support, and then just hiring, and then we'd have that attrition.
So Madam Chair, excuse me. So it's simply a matter of the timing for some of it. But if, let's say we still had 1,798 allowed to fill, I mean, adjusting for 30 people decided to retire next January or something, I mean, would it be unreasonable to expect you'd be pretty close to full capacity? That's kind of what this trend line sort of implies to me. Am I wrong about that?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, you are not wrong. I can tell you, and I'll boldly state, we have not filled a position. There has not been a position not filled because we didn't have somebody for that job. We have a pool of people we could hire from. So if we had a need, we have a pool, we would put them in there. So just want to make sure that's stated. We are not in a situation where there are vacancies unfilled because we don't have somebody for that position, I can assure you. If, for instance, in January, last month, you can see we put 43 people in the academy. You can see where we were at December. We would actually be plus, I have a little screen over mine so I can't see, but about plus, 15 people. The reality is we added new positions for Station 74 in the January budget, so that added 24. So we'll have a little bit of a gap again, but only because we added positions. We would be overstaffed in January had we not added more positions into our budget.
And Madam Chair, just one final thing. It seems to speak to what you talked about earlier. You know, we may be having less applicants, but the goal will be to have quality applicants or tested. It does seem like you're satisfied with the results of the people who are testing and going through the process, because you must be hiring a lot of them.
Madam Chair,
That speaks to quality. I assume you wouldn't be hiring them if you didn't think they were qualified and quality applicants.
Madam Chair and Councilmember, yes, we are very comfortable with our quality. Again, that's why we do want to maintain a larger number, so we have that qualified, robust pool, and the efforts to make sure those folks are ready to go in the academies, that the mentoring and our different actions we're taking, I think, are proving and successful in that. And like I said, also, because we're proactively looking and planning ahead, we make sure our HR staff put on a testing process so we have people ready to go to be hired. We make sure our training staff are ready to train people. And so we don't have a situation where we have a gap that we can't fill because we don't have a certified list, or we have a gap because we don't have an academy scheduled for months out. That will not happen.
And Madam Chair, if you boil it down, you know, the people who send in the applications a little less thought out, a little willy-nilly, I mean, really, I guess ultimately for future evaluations, I think at least what I'm looking for is how many qualified applicants did you think you got, and how many of those qualified applicants did we actually capture as Phoenix firefighters eventually? I'd also be curious how many of those that you identified as qualified and quality applicants went to some other city. Because that would be concerning if it turns out they were like, it could be a Phoenix, but I'm going to go to Glendale or something. Doesn't sound like you think that that's what's happening, and it doesn't sound like that's what's happening with the veterans we already have. They're not switching cities. But that would be something, to the extent it could be pieced together, that's probably the most important number. If we had 500 quality applicants in 2015, and we still have 500 quality applicants, that's really who you're ultimately going to hire. The rest of it is just paperwork. So to the extent that can be flushed out, because this is definitely more heartening than the previous chart, which so.
Madam Chair,
Chief,
if I could just
appreciate it.
add one thing, just looking at it from an HR perspective, the fire department is doing extremely well as it relates to vacancy rates. Their vacancy rate right now is about 1.5%, which is far and away better than any other department in the city. Our overall vacancy rate for city positions is about 15%. And so, you know, I just want to commend the fire department staff for really being proactive. And they've also had the fortune of, you know, being a more attractive department to receive those applicants. So, you know, they've both done a good job of being proactive, and, you know, I think we are getting those quality applicants in that we need to fill those positions.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Councilman Waring, for your questions and comments. I'm just to that point, I'm going to say on the previous slide that shows your recruitment efforts, I think that another important number that is missing there that Councilman Waring was actually just alluding to is of those tested, who end up on the list. Because while, you know, in 2015, you had 2,400 plus people apply and 1,600 test, and you show that for 8 years. You know, if 1,000 passed in 2015 and ended up on our list, but now we only have 200 ending up on our list, that would be incredibly concerning to me. So I would like to see that number if we have it added. And I want to just also clarify, in the past, it's been the fire department's practice to test normally once a year, right? And then use that test for however academies you fill in the year, correct?
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Right, so if I tested in, I'm going to say January, because I get to pick the date, and I made the list, but I'm so far down on the list that I don't make the academy that happens until November, which is maybe our third academy, I might have gone and found another job or went to a different department. Whereas I thought I heard you say you're going to be moving to a testing 2 times a year. Is that correct?
So, Madam Chair, yes, we're exploring that, and really to the point you and Councilman Waring made, is that we don't want to lose qualified candidates that are sitting on a list until we can get them hired, or even worse is they didn't get to test and they have to wait a year to test in order to capture them. So, people graduate EMT school from the community college, and we want to make sure that we're looking, if we were to set static test dates twice a year, every 6 months, using a virtual process, we can process people. People will then know that, Phoenix will be testing in 6 months. They often would wait, knowing that they're have an opportunity, as opposed to a year or longer. They may be willing to go somewhere else. So that's our strategy as well, to really address these issues.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. Please continue.
Thank you. Our next slide here is looking at our sworn staff ethnicity demographic breakdown. Because it takes a lot with 2,000 plus sworn members to make changes in the percentages. We don't see these changing every few months, obviously, but we compare ourselves to Maricopa County. So the pie chart on the left is the Maricopa County breakdown of the demographic of our community. The chart on the right is breakdown of the Phoenix Fire Department for our sworn staff. We did see about a 0.25% increase in the Hispanic percentage. Otherwise, they remain stable. And again, this is a tool that we monitor to make sure that how are we addressing our needs in our community? Are we representing the community? And then this is also part of our recruitment process. I talked about our affinity groups, right? We can then put energy and effort into, if we see a gap or a decreasing percentage in our community, we'll make sure that, does that community know that this job is for them? Do they know about this job? Can we mentor them, prepare them if possible for the career of being a Phoenix firefighter? So we actively track this, monitor this, and include this information in our recruitment process as well. So next is our emergency response times. So I know last time we presented, Councilman Waring and the committee asked about breaking this down by council district. So you'll see in your packet, we provided that breakdown by your district. It was a little bit busy, so we just provided the really overall summaries for you. For response times for us, we measure ourselves against the National Fire Protection Association. That standard is first EMS unit should arrive within 5 minutes. The first fire unit on a fire should arrive within 5 minutes and 20 seconds. And then the remaining balance of that assignment to the fire arrives within 9 minutes and 20 seconds. Our ambulance are regulated by AZDHS. They dictate that we arrive within 10 minutes, 90% of the time on critical EMS calls. And so that's the standards we measure ourselves against. So if you look at 22 and 23, these are the overall response times for these of our engines, ladders, and rescues. This is at the 90th percentile. This is the standard for both NFPA and AZDHS. It is much higher standard than an average. An average is much easier to meet, but it can be very deceiving, if you would, so we do use the standard as it is written. Now, the good news is, if you look at 23, we really didn't increase from 2022. Unfortunately, we are not meeting the standards where we need to meet the standards, and certainly we've made this known and presented this to American Council on different occasions. We are always looking, how do we improve these response times? Looking, can we redeploy units? Chief Ochoa oversees that effort, and watching, for instance, our ambulance, are they in the right location? And make sure they're where they are being the most effectively and efficiently used. We also look at how we dispatch our nature codes. Are we sending the right units, the right number of units to incidents? Because we're really trying to address that increasing demand while we have time to build capacity through new apparatus, through new fire stations that we're adding into the system. So we are looking at the system as a whole, but as we've talked is right now we are using our system as very efficient, very effective. We are probably getting all we can out of it as it is today, and that's why we come forward and ask for more resources, or when we look to change things or remodel things, we're looking for ways to improve, add a different deployment strategy. All those things are on the table. Our goal is to get to that standard. Certainly we know Mayor and Council's goal is as well, but this is where we are as of today as far as our response time standards, or response times. So next,
I'm sorry, I have a question on that.
Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you. So if we can just go back to the response times. So, I mean, clearly, I mean, I'm looking at all of them, but I'm specifically looking at the ones in my district, right? You know, this is a little alarming, right? To see that, you know, we should be getting there, you know, a lot sooner than what we're getting to our folks. And I guess it goes back to what I was asking earlier. I guess, and I don't need a response from you now, but I would like to know how many more firefighters do we need in order to be able to comply with the standard and with the safety of our constituents? I mean, you might not have that number with you. If you have it, great. If you don't, I'm not going to hold you to that right now. But I would like to see that, because this is very alarming. And I love the plan. I see what you're doing now to be able to decrease the times. But this is still a little alarming. So I would like to see what that would take. And maybe, I'm sure you're going to tell me it's not in the budget. You know, we are only budgeted for so much. But I would like to know how many more firehouses we need. And yes, we're getting a couple of them in the next bond program. But if you can provide that number as an update as we're moving forward, or bring it when this goes to the full council, that would be great. Because we continue to talk about filling the positions that we already have, but that doesn't seem to put us into compliance, you know, with the times and when we're arriving to folks' houses. So if you can get those numbers for me, that would be great, because this is a little alarming. This is concerning more than anything else. And look, and I get it. Like, it's a challenge that we have throughout the whole city. That's why we're doing these bonds, to be able to close that gap. You know, it's not just your issue, but like, I think it's an issue in a lot of the different departments that we have in the city of Phoenix. But if you can get that for me, that would be great.
Madam Chair and Councilman Guardado, well, we can get that for you. We had put a presentation in the past together that I think addressed a lot what you're asking for, so we have some of that, or if not all that information. Also, as you said, we do maintain a 20-year forecast we're projecting for fire stations, and that's driven the bond, as you mentioned, for the upcoming bond, and then the city manager's office is looking at consecutive bonds, and that's all part of that, building those stations. Obviously, in your district, we know new Station 15 is our first bond station, so it will have an impact, but we have that information. As far as what it would take, it is a process we are looking at. We also have prioritized plans if and when funding became available for a new unit. Where can we put it? Where does it make the most sense, the biggest impact? So we are prepared for that. We have been fortunate to gain, even in this budget, in the last several budgets, new bodies, new apparatus each year, and then with building 4 stations in the bond and 2 stations outside of the bond, down in Station 62 at 93rd and Lower Buckeye, Station 74 in Ahwatukee. The system is improving, certainly not as fast as probably any of us would like, but at least we're on a path. But we can get that information to you, what we put together as far as what it would take truly. I think it was Madam Chair asked about what it would take to get to that standard, and we have that information. We get that to you.
Perfect, thank you.
We could also bring that back, just in general, since we've had some additions, and put that on a future agenda item, so we can all see where we're at in that plan. Councilman Waring.
So as I look at this chart, I'm not surprised by what I see, but, and maybe I'm misinterpreting, but the response times in District 2 that I represent are the worst by far on every single metric as I go down this list. But the new fire stations we're talking about are, but I also can go to the next page where it talks about unit activity levels. The firefighters in District 2, unless I'm misreading this, are also by far the least busy. So we have by far the least incidences, but it's a big spread out area with a lot of state trust land. So you're spending a lot of this extra time driving, I assume. And then you look at like District 4 basically has twice as many calls for service as District 2 does on pretty much every metric. I mean, dramatically more than twice as many, depending on what you look at. Same with District 5. District 8, that it's way, way beyond. But at some point, the people in District 2 might look at this and go, yeah, but why am I waiting a lot longer? Why aren't you building a whole bunch of fire stations in my area? We got by far the slowest response times. I'll just ask you, what am I supposed to tell them?
So, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, you obviously recognize districts like yours that are large and spread out certainly pose a challenge for us because of the response time. The travel time from a fire station to your residence is longer than, as you pointed out, District 4 because of the density, and they are a challenge. Now, I can tell you that in your district, we did move ladder 50, well, then for ladder 41 to station 52 to add an apparatus into the system there that we think will help. We do have in our forecast stations in your district that we know we need that are in that prioritization plan. So we haven't lost sight of the needs in District 2, and we have stations planned for that. We're looking at rebuilding Station 45 at Cave Creek and Beardsley there with a much larger station as well. So there's actually several projects within your district identified as a need, and it is just in that matrix. So as far as response times, we watch that, and if we can need to move units or if that was an issue, we would look to do that. We really do, unfortunately, have to use a high-risk, low-frequency model. We look at response times, call volumes. As you said, the call volumes are less, so it's a balance between response times and call volumes. And where do we put our resources? We try to balance that out, I can assure you. In Ahwatukee with Station 74, because response times around that western end of South Mountain there were 15, 16 minutes. That was such a priority for response times. While not high call volume, the risk was so great we needed that station, and we were able to get support for that station. So we are having those conversations. We monitor this daily. You can let your residents know that we watch that. We're aware of that. We do have plans for them and plans for new fire stations, and we push that plan forward.
So, one round of bonds has come and gone. Who knows what the future holds, or if things will pass or whatever. But, it didn't make the cut on the first round. And I understand. I can see it both ways. You're also doing what police are also doing. You're sending the bodies to the place where there's the most call for service and they're going to be the busiest. So I understand, I understand the conundrum. It's just, I hope you can understand from the District 2 perspective, which is, I think, by income, the most affluent district. So it's probably paying the most in taxes. I'm going to go out on a crazy limb and guess. And it's getting the worst service. Not saying in terms of quality, but quality also is built into the cake if you get there later. So I guess I'm going to hazard a guess, not being a firefighter myself, the only way to bring down the response times is to build more stations. Because you talked about, making a bigger station out of one that already exists. They still got to travel. So unless you're going to have them out kind of roaming around or something, like our bombers in the military, always prepared to do what they need to do, that's not, I think, how you're doing it. They're still going to be coming from one point, and they still got to get to the next point, and travel time is not going to change. Doesn't matter how many people you put at the station. The only way that would be a factor is if they had, so many calls at once, they came up short, and it doesn't sound like that's usually an issue. So I'd like you to consider that, looking at that. If you were a salesperson trying to make a sale, I understand what you just said, but I think most residents would say, yeah, that's not going to work for me. I mean, I don't think that's being unreasonable or being a jerk about it.
So, Madam Chair,
it's pretty hard to explain. I'm going to pay the most, and the better services are going to go elsewhere.
So, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, I can assure you, one thing we do look at, as I said, is that response time. And there is a point where response times become the priority. For an example, in the very southwest portion of the valley, when we looked at a rescue you need, for Station 62, which has a new rescue when that station is completed at the end of this year, we were able to put that rescue in service and moved it to Station 59. It's not a call volume, but a response time. So we do look at your area, and we do really try to balance. And when it gets to a certain threshold, response times, that is the critical factor. We will put units there or drive for units. So we are watching that. Yes, your response times are higher than some of the other districts, but we do monitor that. So we do look at that, like I said, the call volume response time balance. But ultimately, it isn't always just workload. Response times will become the driving force when it reaches that really critical mass. So certainly appreciate your position and your residents' position. not challenging that at all, but I want you to know that we do watch that. And we do have a station in that forecast, 64th Street, there south of the 51 is in our plan as well. So we do have other stations added, and you're right, in your district, it is going to take more stations. Obviously, that very north part of your station is somewhat rural. We have rural in Phoenix, and it's spread out, a low call volume, so those are always going to skew our numbers. And again, we're using the 90th percentile, so we're talking 90% of the time how often we get into calls. So that's why it looks that way. If we use averages, it would look a lot better, but we want to represent and have full transparency on how we're performing. Thank you. This next slide is our unit activity levels. Again, this was one that, this is not incident totals as we presented last time. We heard the subcommittee. We broke this down by unit responses, so this is all Phoenix Fire units responses to incidents. So the good news is we reduced our unit responses in 2023 by 3%. We also lowered our number of incidents as well. That was not by accident, that was by purposeful action. I'll share in just a minute. But you can see across the last 3 years, and we did include in your packet the breakdown of your council districts for unit responses and activity levels as well for you. But you can see we respond about 370,000 times, if you look at the overall average there, per year of units moving within the system. And as far as 2023, as I said, we see a reduction there. That is because of our nature code review. So we want to, again, make sure we're using what you've given us and our community has given us as far as resources as effectively and efficiently as possible. We reviewed how we were sending units, what units were going on calls, what number of units were going on calls, why they were going on those calls. And we were able to identify, really doing, using smart and objective consideration. We realized there was incidents that it just didn't make sense. We really weren't having any impact. So we were able to reduce some of those response models, and that's why we saw this reduction. Again, trying to address that high demand while we build that capacity in the system. So we're very proud of that work because we did not lower or impact the city or residents in a negative way, but we certainly helped that workload and helped use the resources you've given us. Finally, on this slide, this is our transport activity level. Unfortunately, I don't have such positive news on this one. You can see that in 2023, we had a 16% increase in the number of transports on a very really stagnant or fixed system. That's 13,000 more transports in 1 year. And the red line is the 2023, and you can see there on the 2022, the green line, starting in about October, we started seeing it trend up. It just continued and continued through 2023. House Bill 2431 went into effect in fall of 2022, and that was really the driving force on this. It put a higher level of scrutiny on EMS, emergency services, to transport patients, and so our members heeded that and have transported more patients, as you can see. So that system is being taxed right now. We've talked about that. We would average about 210, 220 transports a day. We're seeing right now 300, 310 transports per day. So that activity on those rescue units is very busy, and that really moves right into the next part of the presentation as we've talked about really reimagining or restructuring our ambulance program. So, title of this slide, our current ambulance model is unsustainable. As we just saw by the numbers of transports on a system that is fixed, it really cannot withstand any more pressure as it is today. So why is it unsustainable? That increasing demand, I've already mentioned, a 16% increase, 13,000 more transports, 300, 310, 320 transports in a single 24-hour period for some units, total for the city. So that increase in demand is just not sustainable. This picture on the right, this picture was taken last week at a local hospital. This is 6 Phoenix Fire Department units at a hospital. So again, when you have 6 units at a hospital taking patients in, if you can only imagine the response times in that area, the pressure on the system is significant right now. And so that is the service delivery impacts. Response times go up, service delivery impacts, unfortunately, are significant, and the system is negatively impacted at this level. Workload on the members is significant. We have days that our units are running 25 to 30 calls. So doing the basic math, 24 hours a day, that's more than 1 every hour. So we have members that are never getting out of their ambulance other than when they take a patient in the hospital. That's not every day, but there are those days. And so this workload on the members, again, is why we do not believe the model as it exists today is sustainable. And then, as I mentioned, House Bill 2431 that went into effect. Because of that, we would not expect or do not anticipate these numbers to go down. We actually expect them to, it seems to even increase some more. We're seeing even in January of this year, increasing number of transports, where I had thought towards the end of last year, maybe we had plateaued. That does not seem to be the case. It does not seem to be we've actually reached our plateau yet.
Could you explain to us what House Bill 2431 did, Chief Walker?
Madam Chair, yes. So House Bill 2431 was legislation that was passed in 2022 and went into effect in November of 2022. And it put a higher level of scrutiny basically on an emergency service provider to transport a patient. So if a person wants to go to the hospital for any reason, virtually we take them to the hospital. The reality is not all patients we see are critical in nature, but to them, that is their emergency. So sometimes they want to go to the hospital by an ambulance. And so at that point, our members are transporting those patients. And so that level of scrutiny brought real accountability or risk. If a member doesn't do that and the individual brings forth a complaint, then AZDHS, which regulates our ambulance services I mentioned, can start an investigation into the member to find out why they did not transport. And so because of that, our members are being very cautious to make sure that they are transporting patients.
Thank you, sir.
Next, so I've talked a little bit about this, but what are the program challenges to make it unsustainable? Well, the increasing demand for service, we've talked about that. The other factor, our model is built on a high dependency on overtime. So 36% of our model requires people to sign up each day to be able to put units in service. And so we've seen this in the fire service in general. You know, people have changed, demographics have changed, where once we maybe had single income families, now we have more dual income families, so wages or people's income are better. They may not need to work overtime. Also, people are looking for a better life-work balance. They may not want to work that overtime. And so relying on a model that is so critical to transport patients, which is a fundamental responsibility of the Phoenix Fire Department, to rely on it at 36% to function is just really not probably sustainable, is not sustainable in my opinion, this high dependency. And so that reliance, an example is in 2023, we had 450 of our part-time units, which are 11-hour shifts that are covered by overtime each day. They were out of service. So it was about 8% of the model was out of service in 2023. Well, the reality is those calls do not go away. The activity level doesn't change, so that workload then transitions to the units that are in service. So again, this high dependency on overtime for the model, on such a critical model, is why we believe it's not sustainable. So the daily staffing for our model requires 30 people to sign up every day. 15 are EMTs, 15 are paramedics. So if we don't have 30 people, we have to put those units out of service. There are days where there are 4, 5, 6, 7 of those 11-hour part-time units out of service. Obviously, you can imagine a weekend, those types of days maybe can be a challenge. And so when you have a system and you lose that many units for a 24-hour period, it has a significant impact. And then the response time, we're challenged, as we've already shown, and it's been pointed out. But again, this is regulated by DHS. DHS regulates all ambulance providers in the state of Arizona, public, private, doesn't matter. And so they regulate our response time standard. As I said on critical EMS, it's 10 minutes, 90% of the time. You can see in 2021, we just met the standard. We were there 90.36% of the time. 2022, we did not meet the standard. In 2023, we did not meet the standard, and it went down just a little bit. So unfortunately, and we have used, I can assure you, we have used our system, our ambulance system as it exists today. There is nothing left in that system to give. We have used it as efficiently, as effectively as possible. We relocate units anytime we can. There's just nothing left in that system to get out of it at this point. And we're at this point. And this is a critical standard because DHS, this is a requirement for our certificate of necessity to function and to provide an ambulance service to the city of Phoenix.
Sir, on the daily staffing and the need to have 30 people sign up for those part-time overtime shifts, are we changing our staffing model so that we will have more people in the system so that we're not requiring overtime?
So, Madam Chair, that is the next couple slides. That is the proposal we want to get to. We're bringing forward to you.
As usual.
Yes.
Thank you.
So you saw it as we saw it. So just to give you a picture of what our current model looks like. So our current model was established in 1984. It has served our community and our residents very well. Obviously, it has evolved since 1984, but it has allows for when a person calls 911, firefighters respond. initiate treatment, firefighters then transport that patient. So from point of calling 911 to arrival at the hospital, sworn firefighter members that are highly trained are taking care of that patient. We believe we have a very good system, provide very good care through this process. So our current capacity is 29 full-time units. These are 24-hour shifts. These are dedicated, budgeted FTEs that cover those units. We have one full-time unit that's a 24-hour unit that's dedicated to Sky Harbor that went into service this fiscal year. And then we have the 15 part-time units that I talked about. So these are the part-time 11-hour shifts that are budgeted as overtime. They require those 30 bodies every day to sign up for to work. 8 of those 11-hour shifts occur during the day. 7 of those occur at night. And so this is the dependency on these part-time units that we mentioned. The staffing model is a 1-in-1, so that means is we have one paramedic and one EMT. And why this is important is this was a discussion last time we presented is so frontline all hazards company responds to a 911 call for a medical condition. They initiate treatment. At the same time, a rescue or ambulance follows up. That 4-person crew provides it. Let's say it's a cardiac event or a drowning. They provide all that care, get that patient ready to transport. They then can turn that patient over to the 2-person crew because we have a paramedic on that unit. That 2-person crew takes that patient to the hospital. The 4-person crew never leaves the primary first 2 area. They go right back in service, ready to respond on the next call. And so having the 1-in-1 model allows for that transition of that continued patient care without the 4-person engine company having to go out of service and going to the hospital. As I mentioned, our system is regulated by AZDHS. Our response times, our billing, and the amount we can bill, what's stocked on an ambulance, everything about the ambulance program is regulated by DHS. And then lastly, our ambulance program is revenue generating, so it's not an enterprise fund, but it does generate revenue. Fire department is a general fund department, and the rescue program or ambulance program this year will generate $73 million for the general fund. So it is a real contributor to the general fund on the revenue side of the column for us. So what are we proposing? Sorry, I had to get all that to get to this. What we are proposing is to take 10 of those part-time 11-hour units that we staff by overtime, and the money that's budgeted for those 10 units, we are going to use that funding to staff 6 full-time units. So we would use that funding every day, move that to professional services budget to staff 6 full-time units. That would give us 48 new bodies in the system that would be dedicated every day to work those full-time units. So now the demand for overtime goes from 30 to only 12. So those bodies could be moved into the pool to staff frontline apparatus that some days can be a challenge for us. They require forced overtime. So we believe this new model will reduce forced overtime needs to keep in service the frontline units. It's going to also increase significantly our capacity within the system. So what we're trying to do is that the level we're at today is unsustainable. We're trying to quickly raise our threshold or our level up to a new level. And then as we move forward, make sure we maintain parity by including ambulance units in all new fire stations. So the new model would look like 36 full-time units staffed with full-time employees every day, 6 part-time units that would still be staffed with overtime. Those would be 12-hour shifts. Those part-time units could be used where the demand is at. So for instance, in Councilman Waring's district, if the high demand is from 9 to 9 in your area for transports, we can move that rescue from 9 to 9 up into one of your stations and they can transport and assist with those numbers, that activity. If it's in Councilman Guardado's district from 11 to 11, we'll put that unit in service in your area from 11 to 11. Really truly getting back to using that part-time really model to hit those peak need times in the day. So this is really the intent of what the part-time units were when they were initiated many decades ago. So the new model also reduces the workload on those current members, as I mentioned how busy they are. So with the new workload, the actual per 24-hour period, the number of calls is just under 10 calls per 24-hour shift, and the number of transports is just under 7. So that's a much more manageable workload. It also provides some capacity for a little bit of growth, as I talked about. We're still continuing to see increases, so we can absorb some increases if we need to over this next year. And then finally, as I mentioned, each new station, 62, 74, and the bond stations, all include an ambulance. So we want to raise our new level up to this current need today, and then grow in parity with the growth as the city grows and the demand for transports grows as well. So this is the new model that we're projecting and bringing forward to the subcommittee, and would like to move to council for approval. We believe this really better aligns with the needs of our community today and our own members, right? The workload on our members. We talked about why would people leave the Phoenix Fire Department. We want to make sure they're not leaving because they're being overworked, and we believe this aligns with that.
Chairwoman, I have a question on that.
Just one second. The 6 part-time units that would be left would be 12-hour shifts. There are 2 people per shift, right?
Madam Chair, correct. There'd be 1 paramedic, 1 MT on each unit.
And so you're saying that would be, so you said 12 part-time positions every day we need to fill those. And would we still use those part-time positions every day?
Madam Chair, yes, we would need and want to use those every day.
But they would be overtime positions still?
Madam Chair, correct.
And I apologize because I'm putting you on the spot here. What would it take for those additional units to become full-time?
Madam Chair, as far as, we'd have to look at the funding, for those units. I don't have the numbers for that. But there is a need for the part-time model in our system, not just for overtime, but really because there's some areas where the demand is that we look at the hour-by-hour call volume. So we'll see that typical spike in any period of the 24 hours. So the part-time model really still has a need in the system to address that. And so we believe there still is a need for those in the system.
Okay, and the full-time units that you're asking for approval for today, will they be stationary, so assigned to Station 7, for example, or assigned to Station 42, full-time?
So, Madam Chair, Chief Ochoa oversees our placement of rescues, so I'll let him talk a little bit how we'll assign these units.
Okay.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Yes, with the ambulances, I'm tasked with evaluating our rescue coverage assessment, so that's something that we constantly evaluate and look at to ensure that our ambulances are strategically placed across the city, ensuring that they're in the most effective position. So we do look at regularly objective information, look at a matrix of information to include response times, call volume, growth of the city, and take all of that, and then we will move units around as we see that critical need.
And how often do you assess that data for the full-time units?
The coverage assessment, we look at the response times on a regular basis, at least annually, but we're looking at about every 6 months because of the significant changes we've seen in response times, transportation volume.
Okay, so you could look at it, I mean, if you're looking at least every 6 months, maybe more often, to Councilman Waring's point as well, to see if, because I understand part-time can go in, but if the full-time units maybe need to be shifted to, we would use our data to look at that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And then if we look at the implementation of this plan, right, we don't know exactly where they will go right now. So because that information, the response times, the growth of the city, that call volume is changing, is through that 9-month implementation, is we would evaluate that at that time to make sure they're going in the most strategic and effective position.
Okay, and if this, I realize you're asking for possible action today, and if we were to pass this on to approve this to move on to council, from that point, how long would it take to implement this plan?
So, Madam Chair, so our plan is if this were to move forward and be approved by the full council, we've already worked with budget and research to add those positions into our budget. So what we would do is we would add 16 new bodies into the academy that starts in May, so they would graduate in September. So we would be able to put 2 units in service in September. We'd have 16 new bodies in the academy that starts in September. They'll graduate at the end of the year, so 2 more units at the end of the year, so January timeframe, and then 16 bodies in the January academy of 2025. They would graduate in May, and those units would go in service in May. So it would take about a year, a little over a year, to fully transition to this new model.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you. I mean, this seems like a really great plan. I appreciate the thinking around this, but my question is, did this go through the labor management process?
Madam Chair and Councilman Guardado, so this was an idea and really a concept that we've been working on for about 3 years. Until recently, we weren't able to really get the support until we made it, as you'll see in a few minutes, very much cost minimal or cost neutral with just a minimal impact first year. And so we were working in collaboration with 493 leadership. They were aware of the concept, and truly it was. We were able to get support from City Manager and BNR for this program change. So since then, we have presented at our different RBO subcommittees. So our staffing RBO, I presented personally to the group to explain that. We recently had our captains meetings where all captains come down and we present to them, and this was laid out to them as well. So did it go through a RBO process where the members worked to develop the idea? It didn't go through that process, but did it go through, was it in collaboration with 493? Yes. President Willingham, Executive Vice President Lindquist were aware of that. We have briefed our members through the RBO process of why we want to do this, just like we've outlined to all of you at the subcommittee, of the impacts to it.
So all of this, what you just came up with here, that was outlined to them, it was given to them, and everyone was okay with all of this. Is that what you're saying?
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, I would hesitate to say everyone.
I mean, just the Labor Management Committee, that's what I'm talking about.
Madam Chair and Councilman Guardado, yes, President Willingham and Executive Vice President Lindquist were aware, supported it. I personally briefed our RBO staffing committee, did not receive any negative feedback in that presentation from that. So obviously, this does have an impact on some members' overtime earning ability. So that's why I'd say not 100% everybody would say they were supportive of it, but overall, the support has been, I'd say, overwhelming in this plan, because whether it's service delivery to the community, which is why we're here, or the impact to our own members, they're being impacted, and so we feel that. So that's how I would outline our involvement with the labor management process.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman.
One other question. Besides, I know that there are other overtime positions available on the other units, right, based on maybe call-outs or certain vacancies. Do we know how often those units are out of service? You gave us 8% on the overtime back here for the ambulance, or was that for the whole department?
Madam Chair, so the 8% was just the part-time overtime units.
Okay.
That's right at 450 shifts per year, those 11-hour shifts, and that was 8% of those. The other units, because they are full-time positions, we would hire back and include if we had to, but now that our staffing levels are where they are, we wouldn't anticipate that, but we would force hire for those positions, just like we would for an engine or a ladder. Those are full-time units that would be force hired. Now, we do include what we call the relief rate with all new units that go into service. So for instance, I said 48 positions for 6 units, so that's 8 per unit. So we only need 6 per unit, obviously, to staff it on a 3-day shift like we work. So the other 2 bodies address the leave usage. So sick time, vacation, potential injury, or training. We look with that relief rate to have enough people to address about 50% of the leave usage for every unit. And that's why we come forward with those extra bodies when we ask for extra bodies when we put units in service. So there'll be about 50% of the time we wouldn't be covering that leave usage, so there would be overtime opportunities for members to work on those. But because those are frontline budgeted units, we would force hire if we had to do that. Fortunately, we have obviously people sign up for that overtime as well. And again, one of the values of this, I believe, is by taking those 20 bodies that are in the pool right now for these rescues, they move into the pool to work the 24-hour shifts, which would staff those 6 full-time units when needed as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, just finishing up here. So the benefits, so increased service delivery capacity, we talked about that, but I can tell you this model as it is gives us 34 more hours of rescue coverage every day in the system as far as an increase. We also won't have those units out of service when we can't staff them, as we just talked about. The dedicated staffing allows for that. It would allow us to have the bodies in the system to staff them. We are reducing our need for overtime on the ambulance model by 23%, so going from 36% to about 13% reliance on overtime. We're not trying to eliminate overtime. It is the appropriate tool to use to staff. It's just that high reliance has been a challenge for us. We will reduce response times because we're going to have these units strategically placed across the city. They're going to be in service longer, and then we're going to use the part-time units where those high demand areas are. We'll eliminate the units out of service, as I've just mentioned, because we'll eliminate that reliance on overtime. The system capacity for future growth. So as I talked about, as we build new stations, we include those rescues in those stations. We'll keep parity as we grow as a city. And then, as I mentioned already, nominal cost. So the funding that we're taking out of our overtime budget to staff and to pay for the full-time bodies is cost neutral, but there is a cost to onboard new employees. Primarily for us is our firefighting clothes, our turnouts, those types of things. So there is a cost for that. We will absorb that in the fire department's budget this fiscal year and next fiscal year for those folks. And then ongoing, it's just going to not have any real cost projected. So what we're bringing forward and what we're actually asking action on is to request the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee to recommend to full City Council the following: approval for 34 new sworn FTE positions, approval to utilize 14 existing frozen sworn FTE positions, and then approval for 4 new non-sworn administrative FTE positions. Those 4 non-sworn are for our ambulance billing section, right? Because our transports are going up, the workload on that staff has obviously went up and generating $73 million by their work. We want to make sure we have enough folks to keep up with that. And so those 4 positions are assigned to our ambulance billing section, and why we included this in the proposal. So with that, that completes the presentation. Happy to answer any other questions.
I want to just verify, because I think you just said this is cost neutral to the general fund, or you already have the money in your budget for this, or do you need additional funds for this?
Madam Chair, the only cost would be for the turnouts, the clothing for our firefighters. We would absorb that in the current fire department budget. So there would not be a cost, an increased cost to the city in our budget or the city's budget to do this.
Your budget has the capacity for all of these additional positions. Okay, great. Councilwoman Guardado?
Thank you. So first, I just want to say thank you for this presentation and just working with me on all the questions and being able to give some clarifications on some of this stuff. But I just wanted to let you guys all know that I am very supportive of this plan. Thank you for the creativity and everything that you guys are doing to keep our residents safe. I think the restructuring of this plan is incredibly important, and it aims to streamline and improve our services. This strategic move holds immense benefit for the city of Phoenix. Firstly, it will significantly enhance our service delivery capacity, ensuring that we can meet the growing demands of our community. Furthermore, by reducing response times, we can offer prompt assistance when it matters the most. One notable advantage of this plan is the elimination of overtime reliance for daily staffing. I get it. I understand our firefighters are tired. They need to go home to their families, and we need to make sure that when they are working, they are on point and they're doing the best job that they can. This not only optimizes resource allocation, but also promotes a healthier work-life balance for our firefighters. Moreover, having consistent unit availability for every shift ensures seamless operations in uninterrupted coverage. By implementing this restructuring plan, we are laying the foundation for a sustainable model that accommodates future growth. I want to thank Assistant City Manager Lori Bays and the Fire Department for bringing this forward thinking approach to the PSJ subcommittee, which will enable us to adapt and thrive with new challenges and opportunities arise. With that, as I endorse this, as I am very supportive of this, we also have to recognize that we are in the middle of a crisis, right? These times that we just saw today are concerning in many of the districts, and I think we need to continue to acknowledge that. I am excited to see the new fire stations that are going to be built in our city, but I think as a city, we need to continue to support the fire department and do whatever we need to do to work on those times and being able to support everyone here. So with that, I will be supporting this item. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Guardado. And I, too, would like to thank the department for always being data-driven and looking at solutions to increase our response time and care to our families and businesses out there, and doing it in a responsible manner. I know that you need more resources, and this committee takes that very seriously. So we do look forward to hearing about the plan that you have in place. And I know we've heard it before, but we have made some movement forward. And I think it's important for us to see what the future holds, and how this committee can continue to support, as well as the entire council, continue to support the fire department and the citizens of Phoenix. So thank you all, Lori, Chief, and Assistant Chief as well, for your work today. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
I have a motion, and do I have a second? Second, thank you. And real quick, I do want to say, although I believe he's still not online, we did have a citizen sign up online, Jared Thies, but he's not online, correct? And he was neutral on this item, but I wanted to put that on the record. Thank you for the motion and the second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Yes, sir.
Before we move on, may I make a request, since they're sitting here rather than wait till the end?
Absolutely, sir.
So the calls for service, the activity levels are so dramatically different in District 2 than some of the other districts. I assume you break down the calls in more detail, like we had so many heart attacks or medical issues or something, so many were fires. I can't believe all these are fires or even close. What I'm looking for is an explanation, because our districts are all basically the same number of people, if not the same physical size. Now, this was before redistricting, so there was some spread there, but it's not hugely dramatic. Why are there so many calls for service from some of these districts compared to District 2? And really, it's all of them. I mean, you're talking 2 to 3 times on some of these metrics. So if there is some way to break down what are these calls and what explains that, I guess I'd like to know. I guess, what are we doing right in District 2 that's producing way less usage of firefighters? Is it because our buildings are newer and have fancier doodads to keep them safe? But again, I can't believe all these are fires or anywhere even close. So I think you see what I'm getting at. What could we change elsewhere around the city to reduce the call volume? Because really, the reason we're not putting more stations in District 2 is because there's so much more volume in these other areas. But at some point, somebody might ask me, like, for a little more detail, and I'm kind of curious myself. So to the extent it's possible, I want to know, like, what's the breakout of these? What explains this?
Lori?
Sorry, I was trying to push the button and it wasn't working. Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, we can add that to the future agenda. What I have right now is to bring back the long-term staffing plan and an update on that, as well as a breakdown of the calls for service by district.
I think that would be very helpful for us all. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Our next item is our Domestic Violence Prevention, Family Advocacy Center and Victim Services update. For that, we have Interim Human Services Director Nicole Aula. I'm so sorry if I butchered that. I feel like I probably did. Deputy Human Services Director Kevin Mattingly, and Assistant Police Chief Ed DeCastro. Thank you all for joining us this morning for this very important topic.
There we go. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I am Nicole Ayola, Interim Human Services Director, and today I'm joined by Deputy Director Kevin Mattingly and Assistant Chief Ed DeCastro. Today we will be talking about the services that are provided here at the Family Advocacy Center, as well as the partnership between the Human Services Department and the Police Department. We will also talk about the activities that we support around domestic violence prevention. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Kevin Mattingly.
Morning, Chairwoman O'Brien and members of the committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to tell you about the good work being performed at the Family Advocacy Center. The Family Advocacy Center is located at 2120 North Central Avenue, and with several organizations represented there on a daily basis, including the Human Services Department's Victim Services Division, the Police Department's Family Investigations Bureau, and Child Help. On the first floor at the FAC, you'll find Child Help and the Family Investigations Bureau's Crimes Against Children's Unit. And together, Child Help and the Child Crimes Unit provide services to minors who have been the victims of a crime, their siblings, and their parents, providing trauma-informed services to the entire affected family. On the second floor, the Victim Services Division and FIB's, thank you, and FIB's sex assault and domestic violence units provide similar services to the adult victims of violent crime. Victim Services Division also partners with the Police Department's Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit to provide services to the victims of human sex trafficking. Together, FAC partners are focused on serving the victims of sexual assault, child abuse, child neglect, domestic violence. We also provide services to the families of homicide victims, the families of those killed during an interaction with police, and the families of those killed in a traffic collision. In addition to the primary partners I previously mentioned at the FAC, we also work daily with the Honor Health Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners who provide forensic medical examinations for adult victims. Phoenix Children's Hospital's Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners who provide forensic medical examinations for child victims. La Frontera Impact who provide therapeutic services to crime victims. And Jewish Family and Children's Services and their program Shelter Without Walls, serving the victims of domestic violence. Both Child Help and Victim Services receive referrals primarily from the Phoenix Police Department for clients who have suffered victimization related to domestic or sexual violence, child abuse, and homicide. In conjunction with other partner agencies listed previously, services might include forensic interviewing of victims and witnesses, forensic medical examinations to secure biological or physical evidence, crisis intervention to secure safe housing, financial assistance, safety planning, long-term therapeutic services, assistance obtaining protective court orders, assistance navigating the criminal justice system, victims' rights, and referral to other departments or agencies based on the client's needs. The mission of the Victim Services Division is to collaborate with community partners to provide comprehensive, safe, and confidential services to the victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, homicide, and other violent crimes. Our focus is to serve victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, homicide, fatal traffic collisions, and human sex trafficking. Our goals are to address the client's most critical and immediate needs at initial contact, make referral to service providers, provide a safe environment for the clients and the staff at the Family Advocacy Center, promote an environment of continuous self-care among staff, and promote and participate in citywide strategic initiatives. Victim advocates and victim advocacy requires that we meet the victim where they are. This means that we address the client's needs as expressed by the clients. We use a trauma-informed approach in our work. Our work product is confidential, and we always work in the best interest of the clients. In addition to the advocacy conducted at the Family Advocacy Center, victim advocates are also officed at the Phoenix Municipal Court, the John F. Long, Travis L. Williams, and Sunny Slope Family Service Centers, and the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit. These, we refer to them as mobile victim advocates, are often called upon by police to respond to crime scenes to contact victims directly. In the pursuit of our goals, we have several contracts with service providers. These include hotline services for persons experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault, and human sex trafficking. We have a dedicated hotline targeting teens in crisis. We have a contract to operate a domestic violence emergency shelter. And we have contract for case management services at Starfish Place. The role of the victim advocate is to provide immediate crisis intervention for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, the families of homicide victims, the families of persons killed in a police interaction, and victims of sex trafficking. Services are tailored to the need of the client, drawing from the list of the resources I previously mentioned. With your permission, I'd like to share a real-life success story we recently experienced. A victim advocate at the FAC was working with a client, a victim of domestic violence. Over the course of several months, the victim had filed 9 reports of violence suffered at the hands of her ex-boyfriend, including an aggravated assault involving a weapon. The victim advocate assisted her with securing an order of protection, and during safety planning recommended that she consider the installation of video surveillance cameras inside her apartment. The client was able to secure cameras and needed expertise from another family member, and had the cameras installed with viewing capability on her phone. While returning to work, home from work, the client checked her camera feed and discovered that her ex-boyfriend had broken into her apartment and was laying in wait for her. Police were called, and the suspect barricaded himself inside. After some time, police made entry, only to find the suspect hiding in the crawl space of an adjacent apartment. The client's use of cameras and as part of her safety plan saved her from what was likely a violent encounter inside her own home. This case remains open at the FAC. FAC also provides services, as I mentioned, to the families of persons killed in a police interaction. Police critical incidents, as they are called, are broadly defined as the death of a community member resulting from an intentional or unintentional action of a police officer, including in-custody deaths. When a critical incident occurs, the Victim Services Division is informed, and the case is assigned to a family liaison. A family liaison is a victim advocate who has volunteered to work critical incident cases and who has received additional training covering the criminal and administrative investigation process surrounding critical incidents. They assist next of kin with navigating these processes, including assistance with the release of public records, the return of seized non-evidentiary property, and by acting as a conduit of information between the next of kin and the police department. In the immediate aftermath of a critical incident, family liaisons also provide crisis intervention services. Victim Services Division is partially funded by grants. Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA, funds 6 full-time victim advocate positions at the FAC, plus 1 supervisory position and 1 full-time casework aide. Funding from VOCA also helps with training and office equipment and support of mobile advocacy efforts. We enjoy a grant from the Arizona Office of the Attorney General, which we use to purchase clothing, print informational brochures, and stock items for immediate use by clients. We also received a grant from the Arizona Child and Family Advocacy Network, or ACFAN, providing a one-time grant earmarked for the maintenance of staff and client mental health, sometimes called self-care, Using these funds, the Victim Services Division conducted our first ever staff retreat and built and furnished a self-care room at the FAC. Staff members have maintained membership in ACFAN for many years. ACFAN provides training and support to family and child advocacy centers all around Arizona. The Victim Services Division is exploring several uses of technology we don't currently enjoy, including the purchase of video cameras and door alarms for loan or gifting to clients who cannot afford them. There has been discussion of securing funding to provide shelter using hotels for short-term emergency stays, and funding to provide therapeutic services based upon a qualified vendors list. Victim Services Division uses a case management software, we just call it CMS for case management, developed in-house to document our casework.
There you go.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. In an effort to meet the stipulations of the Information to Victims from Law Enforcement statute, as well as the Arizona Constitution Victims Bill of Rights, we are deploying or working on deploying a cutting-edge solution designed to enhance the police department's capabilities by providing automated customer service and crime victim notifications. This solution will leverage automation, transparency, and community engagement, ultimately enhancing public safety and trust. It adds communication channels created to engage victims through email and/or text and callers through text. It also adds automatic custom messaging depending on the call type for the victims. It also will send out mobile-friendly surveys so that we can see how we are doing as a department. It provides real-time updates to reporting parties as well as 911 callers, giving them an estimated time of arrival for police departments, for police officers, in an effort to reduce the number of calls to our communication dispatchers. It serves crime victims by keeping them informed throughout the investigative process. They are able to register, and they will receive updates on their case as it moves through the process to submittal to the county attorney's office. It provides additional information related to court proceedings as well as links to additional resources. It has information for shelters, for courts, as well as how to get a hold of the assigned detective if need be. And then lastly, it includes multilingual options. It is being translated into 5 other languages: Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, French, and traditional Chinese. So victims of all cultures can be able to have that information readily available to them on their phones or computers. The Family Advocacy Center also houses the Family Investigations Bureau. On the first floor, it houses child crimes that works alongside child help. And on the second floor, it houses the adult sex crimes and domestic violence units. Several years ago, the idea of creating a formal victim center was created, and through the generosity of the City Council, the Phoenix Police Foundation, and the Winged Hope Foundation, money was secured to be able to start this process. Last fall, it broke ground, and the first phase of the floor renovation began. The Victim Center is mostly complete. We're waiting for some technological pieces to show up. The key features to the Victim Center, however, is it allows the victims an exclusive place to go during their traumatic time. One of the issues that we had before is victims would have to stay in the foyer area while they were waiting for detectives. Now we have family rooms that they can go into. There is a natural breezeway to the nurse's exam office, and they don't have to work around detectives or go through other ways to get there. And we wound up being able to get new recording equipment that can pick up low voices or whispers. So when the victim is traumatized and not able to speak loudly, we can still record all those interviews. And that is expected to be completed by the spring of 2024 this year.
So just a moment to talk about some of our prevention and education efforts. As you know, October is designated as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This past October, Victim Services staff presented at 16 public events, plus one event for city employees. These included public events such as Light the Night, held at City Square Lawn, Paint the Park at Encanto Park, and several events at Phoenix high schools. Spanish-speaking victim advocates also participated in 3 radio interviews focused on domestic violence awareness and prevention. We also presented virtually during webinars. All these events were coordinated through the Strategic Initiatives Program.
Domestic violence detectives handle over 22,000 calls per year. One way that they try to mitigate that number down is to go out and give presentations to community groups and organizations to educate them on what is a domestic violence and what they can do to report those and deal with those. Detectives have participated in Paint Phoenix Purple event at Burton Bar Library last year, where they gave a presentation to the group of how a domestic violence call works from the 911 call all the way through prosecution. And it shone a light on the mysteries that some people believe happen during a domestic violence investigation of what they're able to do, what they can do, what they can't do. And it was extremely helpful and received very well. They have also gone to media interviews with radio and television personalities regarding Angels on Patrol, to give them exposure of what they do and what they offer. And Angels on Patrol is a nonprofit organization that gives services to victims at the scene or right after an interview, such as clothing, food, and if need be, housing. And then in an effort to better create a victim center, we spoke with our partners in other cities that have victim centers, and we tried to find out what didn't work so that we can make ours as best as we can. And we think we have.
So Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month occurs each February. Staff provides education on healthy relationships, identifying red flags, and available community resources. In 2023, Victim Services staff supported 9 events for teen dating violence awareness held at Maryvale High, Trevor Brown High, La Jolla High, and Westview High Schools. These events were full-day affairs held at the school. This month, February 2024, we have 8 events on the schedule. As previously mentioned, Victim Services Division manages a contract for Teen Lifeline, an organization which provides direct outreach to Phoenix high school students and operates a hotline targeting teens in crisis. This hotline enables teens to communicate by their method of choice, by text or by phone. It's 24 hours.
School resource officers are required to teach law-related education while in their function in the school. One of the courses that they teach is teen domestic violence. They work regularly with domestic violence detectives to find out if there are any trends happening. Excuse me. And they create age-appropriate lessons around those topics. Some of those topics are the red flags in teen relationships, recognizing narcissistic behavior, as well as the dangers of social media, which is a big one. And this allows the students to have some skills as well as some resources to deal with any issues that they're seeing within their own personal life or their friend's life.
Victim Services Division, Family Investigations Bureau, and Child Help often collaborate on cases which require both a criminal investigation and social casework. We share the universal goal of ensuring that our clients are physically safe, emotionally able to cope, and ready to participate in their own recovery. While not every client is ready to change their domestic situation in spite of the violence inflicted upon them, we offer assistance and resources to help them improve their situation at a pace which is acceptable to them. That, we're open to your questions.
Thank you all so much for the presentation this morning. Do I have questions from any council members? I would just like to say thank you to, yes, bless you, Councilman Waring, to the foundations, Phoenix Police Foundation and the Winged Hope Center for their help with the Family Advocacy Center, as well as Angels on Patrol with not just their help in this area, but in many areas with our Phoenix Police Department and actually across the Maricopa region. I think this is a wonderful example of that private and public partnership to ensure that we're providing the best services that we can to our families and our folks who are not going through great times. I am very appreciative to see all the services that are out there to help those who have been victimized, but also to help prevent this from happening. Education is so important, especially for our young people. So I appreciate you all being here today and presenting. And again, I apologize for mispronouncing your name, Ms. Nicole. Thank you all. Our next two items are we have one for info only, but then number 5, our CAP hiring, recruitment, and metric report is for information and discussion.
Madam Chair, that's a typo on the agenda. I apologize.
And that's okay. However, I do know we have a question on that item from Councilman Robinson. So if we could just let Councilman Robinson get his question on the record.
Chairwoman O'Brien, thank you very much for that. The single question I had dealt with item number 5 with regards to calls diverted CAPs, their whole process. I'm just curious as to how many calls have been diverted, and I don't need an answer right now, obviously, Chief Ochoa. The calls that have been diverted from the police to the CAP program. I'm just curious as to how effective that has been.
Madam Chair, Councilman Robinson, thank you for the question. Yes, the total number for 2023 is 842 calls diverted directly from PD communications to our BHU dispatchers. 842.
142 in 2023 were diverted.
Were diverted, yes. If I can add, that is the direct transfer from there. Something that we are working on quantifying is capturing the data of when there's a co-response model, when a patrol officer goes, identify that the BHU is the appropriate resource, and we're able to release them back to their patrol duties.
So you'll be tracking that this coming year?
Yes, we're working through that right now to actually capture that data so we can reflect those numbers as well.
Excellent.
Chairwoman, thank you very much. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Appreciate that question. Do we have any additional call to the public at this time?
Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, and then we have a draft future agenda for March. I know we have a couple of requests from Councilman Waring already. Are there any other future agenda requests? Seeing none, I'm afraid we should mark this on the calendar. We're done a little early, so meeting is adjourned.
What a success Super Bowl 57 was, and you've already heard some of those numbers. This was the 4th time the Grand Canyon State has hosted a Super Bowl, and we certainly took the opportunity